So we ended last time talking about marginality, and there are different or many terms or concepts we actually use in economics that have different meaning, different reach. And you can apply many of them actually in different situations. I just said it's about externalization of cost, meaning expecting me to shout through the room that you can sit in the last row, which of course is not the strict term of externalization as we use it in economics, but it is. Because as I said, it is quite a physical effort to speak about 3 hours twice a day very loud. And it may be, for whatever reason, be more comfortable to sit at the back. Perhaps I'm afraid that I'm jumping at you or whatsoever. I usually don't. But these are questions, and we talked last time at the end about marginality. And there are at least two reasons, two perspectives when we talk about marginality. The one is the very specific, in connection with the law of diminishing marginal utility, where we have one good, one action or whatsoever, and every additional use, every additional of these goods does not have the same value as the initial one, and it is decreasing bit by bit. So everything you add is less valuable. Of course, it does not matter in terms of objective issues, because the item itself is the same. What you have in the textbooks, it's about pizza, it's about something to eat or whatever. It is the same. It doesn't get any worse over time. But the value in terms of utility, meaning your individual preference, is decreasing. At the same time, this principle of utility has another dimension to it, another meaning, if you want. It is the name that is linked to entire thinking, to entire school of economics, and this is the mainstream school, mainstream paradigm of economics as we use it today. Meaning this is what I am mainly teaching here, supposed to teach here. This is what you find in most of the textbooks as well, as the standard, and then you may find other opinions, other schools mentioned. But the idea behind it is that there is very much a shift in economic thinking from looking at the production and the value that is generated during the process of production towards determining the creation, the generation of value as a matter of markets. There are good reasons for it, different reasons for it. The one is simply that what we see, what we usually are involved in, is we see value in terms of price on the market. We don't see what is going on behind the scenes. As I said, this is the mainstream, and talking briefly about this, there are now 3 books on the internet on Blackboard. No, 2 books on Blackboard. One, at least many of you have the copy of it. That is the textbook, standard textbook that had been used last year. Many got inherited, so to say, the copy of it. This year, the main textbook is the core from this new project, new approach. Saying it's new, it is not really new, because it is very much in the tradition of this mainstream thinking. The approach is different, the presentation is different, but what you see there is very much the same. And then I uploaded a book from Yannis for your private use, and it is as well in the library, which is as well presenting these ideas, but critically discussing them, critically approaching them, and you should actually consider to use all three, just to look something up, to read them, and to get a little bit different approaches. There's always something that some prefer this, others prefer that, whatever is the most convenient for you. The stuff that is covered is very much the same. As I say, the main difference is a more critical discussion in the book of Yannis Varoufakis, and still presenting the main questions. Why it may be useful as well to look into the different books is that you get different contexts. So you explain one thing, that's what I do here in the lecture as well, during the lecture, but it may be that it gives you a different idea of the context. And the context is always, as we will see today again, very important. So continuing then, taking up on this, the law of diminishing marginal utility, in the narrow sense, it is simply the increasing input has decreasing relative output. It is a matter of production, and it is a matter of consumption. So in both respects it plays a role, and at the first instance, the first glance, it is of course nothing you can say critically about it. It's simply describing something that is happening in terms of satisfaction. And satisfaction means the customer satisfaction, meaning what we get out of it as consumers, and it is something that is relevant when it comes to terms of production, meaning the productivity. Now, don't get misled, don't use it, understand the term literally here, productivity, but it is as more as we use, as more as we work, at the end of the day, the outcome is limited, is limiting, is diminishing. If you work, start in the morning, fresh and bright, some people prefer the afternoon, you are very productive. After an hour, you get a little bit tired. After the second hour, you will get a little bit more tired. And in the evening, you are exhausted. And you can still do something. But actually, the output of what you do is very limited. So it is important to keep this in mind as one, and perhaps today in our thinking, the central issue that determines our thinking when it comes to economics. It is something that is relevant as well for the economic standards in terms of the thinking, the main functions that we use in economics. And I said a little bit hesitatingly the main functions, because we are not talking in stricto sensu about mathematical functions. This is usually what we do, and this is what we do in this context as well, sometimes. But first and foremost, we are not thinking about that, but we are thinking about a wider issue as a matter of functioning. This is how society and how within society or as part of society the economy works. And these are standards, in one way, determining or guiding our thinking, but as well in terms of what actually happens in society. What happens in society, what guides economic processes. And economic processes are, beyond mathematical functions, economic processes are always societal processes that take place in the way of understanding, defining, and then shaping the way we are dealing with scarcity, with cost benefit, with efficiency, and others. The welfare function, equity, is one of these central issues, even if we may say at times, what we see when it comes to economics, it's not really about welfare. It's about competition. It's about getting a better position, pushing somebody else to the side. And especially if we look after, I don't know when it was exactly, I'm bad in timing, Mr. Trump, we can fear a disaster in terms of welfare function. I'm not the only one who does it. But if you go to him, if you talk to him, he will never say, no, I want inequality, just that some people are really well off and the rest I don't bother. They can live in misery. He will always justify whatever he is doing, even Hayek, Friedman, or other people who would be behind it, this kind of economics. They would say, no, of course, yes, it is about inequality. We accept this. But we don't do it to leave people down there, to leave people in misery, but this is what actually motivates them to get out. This is what actually creates competition, and with this competition they will have the opportunity, they will have the conditions that at some stage they will be better off. This is their thinking. And there you see two very important things. A, this is their thinking. You have different schools in economics, very different, very contradicting. And you always imply, directly or indirectly, at the forefront or in the background, the idea of this is what our society should look like. Then, of course, it goes on. What is welfare? Is it material welfare? Is it equality? Is it well-being in subjective terms? There are different options. Important it is to keep this in mind. It is how to coordinate then in terms of economics, how to coordinate the different productions, because this is production and exchange. This is what we are interested in when it comes to economics. We are not interested in helping each other. This is part of it. This is subsistence production. This is general exchange. But in economics, we are interested in production for the market and exchange on the market. The rest plays a role, but it is not the core of our interest. And then the second point is how to achieve an equilibrium. Importantly, how to achieve an equilibrium, because it is not given automatically and as a stable, permanent condition. There is this tendency towards an equilibrium. Sometimes it is suggested it happens automatically, and sometimes it is considered to be result of political intervention. But the idea of an equilibrium is always there when it comes to market economies, capitalist market economies. And it is, as I said, not least as well about scarcity. Scarcity as one of the cornerstones, of the four cornerstones in economics. And then we can move from there to efficiency requirement. In economics, we are only interested in these processes when there is this question of how to deal with limited resources. If we have enough, fine, take it. Our problem is, in economics, what is if we don't have enough and if we have to distribute it amongst people who want it? Because the underlying idea is everybody wants everything. At least everybody wants as much as possible, as much as this individual utility function suggests. The presumption is this automatically conflicts scarcity with the wants and needs of somebody else. If we have 100, everybody wants one, fine. But the idea is there is somebody who wants to have two at least, and then we are in trouble. It's too much, even on a very small scale. And this is, of course, not about 100 distributed amongst 100, but we are talking about real amounts, real resources. How to deal with it? That actually everybody makes the most out of it in terms of welfare. And then you have different options. You can say, okay, simply divide it. How many people are there? How many, what do we have in terms of resources? Distributed equal terms. Just or not just? Welfare equity or not? What is with those people who need more? For whatever reason. Old people need something different than children. Can we say, but you only get the same as everybody else? Or do we have to think about something different? In terms of production, how to use the limited resources we have in terms of raw material, in terms of machines, in terms of human labor force. How can we use this in the most efficient way to arrive at this idea of welfare? So giving the answer of efficiency actually means having another question that we cannot really solve in the strict sense. Just saying, okay, this is the definition. We can do it sometimes on the technical level. We'll come back to this later. But this is not the entire answer. On the technical level, we have actually this production possibility frontier. I recommend to use this production possibility frontier instead of PPF. PPF is usually used, and we can use it. There's a good reason for using it. But the good reason not to use it is simply that you easily get confused and that you forget actually what it is about. This is one reason. Another reason is that sometimes, not in PPF, I wouldn't know it, but sometimes you have the same abbreviation used for different items. We have had this with C for capital and consumption, was it, or something? I don't know yet. It was showing up at some stage in different meanings. So use what you actually mean. Production possibility frontier, coming back to this later, linked to opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is, what are the options? On the individual level, what actually happens, so what actually happens when we talk about opportunity cost is looking at the opportunities we have. Usually, simple minds, we say there are two options. We can choose. There are two things we can do, two things we can buy, and we have to choose. We have to the choice, what are we going to do? So the one is studying. This is something you want to do, you have to do, you decided to do. And it is something where, in a way, every day you have to follow up on this, because at some stage you said, I am going to study. And you cannot easily change every day and say, now I will make this BA. And tomorrow you say, well, I don't really. You can, of course, you can drop out, but then you cannot come back to it. So it is a decision. Once this decision made, as firm decision, you say, okay, this is what I have to do, and I have to do it every day. Going to lectures, reading the books, doing homework, whatsoever. The other is free time. Whatever this means. It can mean that you read books but not economics or not finance, accounting, whatever you have to do. Something that is not linked to it. So free time. What is the decision now? What can you do? You always say there is a benefit to doing the one thing. This is the first problem. What is the benefit? Maybe you prefer actually to have free time. But we say actually studying is that part where we say this is the benefit. But there is a cost to it. There is a loss to it. Because studying needs time, and the time is limited, scarce resource. So, whenever you study more, at least, where as more as you study, as less time you will have for your leisure time, free time. Let's say there are the three parts in the day. The one is simply sleeping and physical recreation, eating, stuff like this. The other is studying, and the third one is leisure time. sports, photography, going to concerts, hanging out, whatsoever. So simply, you can have this model of 888. That's the easy mathematical way. The next problem is then some people need more sleep, some less. For some people, it takes more time to do ABC. So you have individual differences there. But in any case, whatever you decide, you have to decide how to balance these two sides. Opportunity cost means basically you pay with your free time. You have a loss here. You pay with the free time to have the benefit, the gain, on the side of studying. As I said, it doesn't matter if you say it's not really about studying and free time. It may be that you have a paid job during your free time, but this is free time because we only relate something, two things, free time, whatever you do, and studying. Opportunity cost, meaning we look at what does it cost us to do one or the other. The textbook examples are usually referring to something like this. In many cases, you find actually this bold assumption that students prefer to sleep, and then it's sleeping against getting up. But the same principle, at least, applies as well when it comes to production. We always have different options. As I said, there are different items going into the process of production, different factors of production, and we have to look at how do we distribute the different options that we have. What is the best way of allocating the resources we have? And all this is very much, these mechanisms are very much about allocating resources. We have something, we have to combine it, and we have to think about, make out what are we doing with it. And the production possibility frontier is exactly this, applying this model on production. And then we get a nice curve like this. The idea behind it is efficiency. Get the most out of what we have. Making the most out of it. There are two theoretical options, but the one we won't go for it, and the other we cannot go for it. The one that we will skip, it's a theoretical option, but we don't go for it, is the underuse. We have something left at the end, which we still could use in the productive process. But we just leave it there without using it. We have 10 machines, we have this and that amount of raw material, and we have so many workers. And we say, well, 10 machines, it's enough if there are 9 used. We won't do this if there's not a good reason for it. One reason may be that there are not enough workers. One reason may be that the energy efficiency is too high and it is better to use the 9 because we have only this and that amount of raw material, that at the end of the day 9 are enough. But we don't want to have this machine, raw material or whatsoever, underutilized, not being used. We want to use everything to the best, to the most efficient outcome. The one we cannot go for is one outside of the possible combinations. If we have raw material, a certain amount of workers, this defines limitations to, for instance, the machines we can use. If we would be interested in using another machine, we may need more raw material, we may need more workers to run this thing. But we simply cannot do it. Physically impossible. We may want to work 30 hours per day. We simply cannot, because there are only 24 hours per day. Working 24 hours is already something we should not try to overstretch. Not least because the capacities to work, to concentrate will decrease. Now, the optimum is to combine the different factors we have in such a way that we use them all with the maximum output. To stretch the combination in such a way that we go along this line. One of the reasons behind it is that we can substitute certain elements. The one typical example is we can use highly efficient machines using less workforce in terms of living workforce, or the other way around. We can use different raw materials. But this shows that there are 2 points to it, 2 times to it. The one is the short-term perspective, which we cannot change or cannot easily change. If we do it, we usually end up with underutilization or overstretching, which is not possible. In the long run, it looks different, because in the long run, we can change the composition. If I have 10 people working for me, you will be here tomorrow as well and work for me. There is the contract defining for November, you are employed. I employ you for this and that job. If I cannot do it, legally I still have to continue, even if you cannot literally work, at least I have to pay you. So what do? I look for a way that I employ you, meaning that you are busy. I'm very friendly and like if you are relaxed sitting in the corner, but this is not my business. So I try to get you busy, to get you employed. I cannot change this. For December, it's a different story. Considering that we have a contract for 1 month, in December I can say, sorry, I don't have work anymore, stay at home. Or the other way around, I can say, great, I need actually 5 more workers, and they can come and join. So in the long run, whatever this means in concrete terms, I can change the picture. Can employ more, I can employ less, I can get more, less raw material, different raw materials, different machines. There is scope, but this is different in the two time perspectives, the changes I can make. There's one additional point that is important. Looking at the production possibility frontier, the one perspective is looking at the output, and the other perspective is looking at the input. Whatever I produce, this is the process of production in the strict sense, has these two sides. We will come back later to this. The one is the input. How do I produce? What do I put into this process? And the other is, what do I get out of it? In terms of quantity, in terms of quality. You can work faster. The question is and will be, can you maintain the same quality if you are working faster and longer? So it's always concerned with these two sides. And this is actually where we come to this point of the different approaches, where we have exactly this situation of the process of production being central or if we look at the entire process. This is where value, exchange value, but as well use value is created. This is where we work in concrete terms, where we produce something and where we have an outcome. But the realization of the entire process, when it comes to the value, is happening here on the factor market. And it is happening here at the other end at the market for consumables. Here we create value. Here we generate value. This is the core of the entire process. And here, between input market and output market, we actually realize it. These are two different things economically. As well, if you do accounting, two different things. As well, if you do finance, two different things. Because what happens is, for instance, in terms of finance, here it is investment, and here it is profit, gain, something like this. You have to keep this in mind as an important distinction on the one hand, and as important in terms of understanding the entire economic process. Input, output, what do you influence, how do you do it, and where do you actually create the value? What matters, especially two things. The one is technology. When we are talking about production function, it depends very much on the technology we use.